in the first chapter of the book, which is one of the most well-known, famous, and imposing. It says the following: the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. At the beginning of heaven and earth, I call it non-being. The mother of individual beings is called being. Turning towards non-being leads to the contemplation of the marvelous essence. Turning towards being leads to the contemplation of spatial limitations. Did everyone understand everything? I don't even need to explain this. Let's move on to the next part. It is important for you to notice. By the way, the Kybalion, for those who have been following along, will give us valuable assistance at this point. Plato will also provide us with another precious contribution. I am counting on several supporters. Because this idea that the creative being of the universe cannot be contained in a name is actually quite recurring, my friends. Because every name is a limitation. Anything I say about God, I am placing things outside of him. Anything I say about God, I am, in a way, creating something that is not God. And then he becomes two. He becomes limited by the very name itself. And sometimes, the act of naming things, in fact, Lao Tzu speaks a lot about this. When you give something a name, you begin to exclude everything that falls outside that name, and you start to create multiplicity, dualities, and even violence. Some kind of exclusion arises, which leads to an internal exclusion and ultimately generates some form of violence. So, it is interesting for us to realize that this nomenclature, Tao, the idea within the Chinese tradition, because it is a very ancient name, is that the Tao would be a mysterious being without any substance, neither spiritual nor material, from within which a creator being, a demiurge, would emerge. And from this demiurge would come forth spirit and matter, which is the primordial duality. So, this is something important for you to remember, as it will be very useful to us at all times. It is the sequence of 0, 1, and 2 for Pythagoras. This is called the Pythagorean decad. So, there is a 0, which has been represented by many traditions. For the Egyptians, it was the spiral of Abydos. 0 does not represent a mere, let's say, symbol for accounting or for mathematics. 0 is the idea of a being that precedes all manifestation. And this being, from within itself, when it decides to manifest the universe, it is as if it is breathing. It exhales and inhales. When it exhales, it manifests the universe. When it inhales, it draws everything back into itself. It is the first being. For India, it was called Parabrahman, and there, Brahman. There is the Ein Sof for the Kabbalists, emptiness. It is the void. And think of a name where Lao Tzu truly appreciate is this emptiness. It is said that the void is a very powerful and surprising idea, but that people are afraid of it. You will see that, at a certain point, it is said, look, it is a room. The four walls set the boundaries, but it is the emptiness within that gives it purpose. The emptiness within all things is what gives all things their usefulness. And the void is the truest of all. But humanity fears the void. Let us add this word, void, to our Taoist glossary, because it will be used throughout. Void, then, is 0, that which precedes manifestation. Then this being generated manifestation, decided to bring forth manifestation. Let us manifest, let us begin. Puff, what do? I create a supreme architect, a great builder, a demiurge, a one. And this one, from itself, have you seen in mythology how a god is split in half and generates heaven and earth? Have you ever heard of Tiamat, for example? This is very common. In other words, this one being, this demiurge, this great creator, divides itself and gives rise to the two, which are spirit and matter. And from there, the whole story of multiplicity begins. Spirit and matter combine in various forms and generate all multiplicity. So, this first concept is very important for us to grasp. What is the Tao? The Tao is the void, it is the 0, where all things dissolve, where everything will meet again, where all things return and from where everything emerged. Things come out of 0 and, in the end, return to it. It would be the total manifestation of the universe, a complete cycle of manifestation. It may seem abstract, but you will see that it will find 1,001 practical uses for this concept. He will say that if we do not contemplate this, we become materialistic. Because if you believe that substance is real, you will want to possess it. And if you want to possess it, you will be filled with desires. And if you are filled with desires, you will become selfish. And substance is not just substance, merely material, it is spiritual substance. Because to think that we are special from the spiritual creates a vanity even worse than thinking we are special because we have a new car. It is harder to overcome. So, I am the most righteous one here. I am not vain, but the most righteous one here is me. Do you realize that this is vanity? A difficult kind of vanity, because you can prove to me your car is better than mine. It's not very difficult. But to prove to me that you are more righteous than I am, if I don't want to see it, I simply won't see it. It is a much tougher vanity to break down. And it is also a sense of possession, a kind of separateness. In other words, spiritual vanity, as Helena Blavatsky said, is more complicated than physical vanity. So, if you believe that substance exists, you believe it can be yours, and you will become selfish. And if you become selfish, you will turn the world into a kind of hell. And then that is the end of the story. We know how the rest goes. Isn't that right? So, this is very important. Notice that the assumptions we carry about life shape many of our actions, and we are often unaware of it. They are behind our motivations. Have you ever imagined opening your eyes in bed in the morning and asking yourself, what will I do today? Am I going to possess something? There is nothing to possess. Am I going to project my name? There is nothing to project. I do not have one name. My name is the great name. It has already been established. That has been done for me since the beginning of the universe. The work is already complete. Imagine having a motivation that is not rooted in any form of selfishness or vanity. We probably would not even get out of bed. We would still be lying there, staring at the ceiling and thinking, not this, that is vanity. Not this either, that is also selfishness. Because we are so conditioned to believe in separateness that we hardly ever think in any other terms. Sooner or later, we end up falling into some form of selfishness, some kind of aggression, some kind of violence. So, this root seems like a useless abstraction. Yet, it may be the most useful knowledge of all. At least, that's how Lao Tzu thought. So, he continues by saying, the principle of heaven and earth, the zero, I call non-being. The mother of all beings, which is the one, I call being. You might say, but wasn't the mother the one, wasn't it the demiurge? And what if it is feminine? And what if it is a demiurge in the feminine form? Does the one have a feminine aspect, perhaps? I don't know. But we have just invented one. Because this is very interesting. They say that when the universe manifests, the one is the mirror of the zero. It is as if it were the counterpart of zero in the manifested world. So, it is more likely that it is feminine. The Indian tradition calls the one Mula Prakriti. The great mysterious woman of Lao Tzu is Mula Prakriti. Mula Prakriti is a substance that contains both spirit and matter within itself. It has not yet divided. She is the great mother from whose womb everything will emerge, spirit and matter. In other words, the great demiurge would be feminine. At least, a large part of the universal tradition speaks of this. It is Mula Prakriti, Great Mother, the first shadow of the unknown, the first manifestation. So, this would be the root of being. And being is spirit and matter. Non-being is a mystery. It is nothing. So, if I am walking through something that is a mystery, I must learn to love the mystery. I cannot become attached to one thing or the other. Notice, everyone. Every time in history that civilization has denied matter, when we say we are only spiritualists, it leads to a dark age. No, everything material is sinful. Fanaticism. Then we arrive at the modern and contemporary age, and the spirit is denied. We become only materialists. Fanatical and dogmatic. You see, when you deny one of the pillars, the temple collapses, the pediment falls, you must have both pillars. In other words, heaven and earth, spirit and matter, both are aspects of this great manifested mother, of this one. Is everyone able to understand this? So, zero, without any substance at all. The one, the creator, or the feminine one, whichever you prefer. That way, it is more politically correct. Then, it moves to two, which is spirit and matter. For India, Parabrahman, Mula Prakriti, and Purusha and Prakriti, spirit and matter, the primordial duality. So, he says that this being is the gateway for all beings you can imagine, even spiritual ones. It is both the bicycle and love, it is the house and fraternity. Everything is a play of forms, whether on a more concrete level or a more subtle one. Everything originated from this primordial unity. So far, so good. Is everyone still with me? All right, let's continue. So, the being takes on spatial limitations. And non-being carries an absoluteness that we cannot even begin to imagine. So, as I have already mentioned to you, essence and existence, and the story of 0, 1, and 2. Spirit and matter, in general, are associated with heaven and earth within Taoism. This is Taoist terminology. So, from now on, when I ask you what non-being is, it is 0. What is the primordial woman? It is 1. What are heaven and earth? They are 2, spirit and matter. This is the Taoist Genesis. It is the beginning of the story. And from spirit and matter, individual limited beings begin to emerge, which, for him, is the great illusion. If we ever come to realize that separateness is a great illusion, then we will become fraternal. As long as we think that you are one and I am another, I will keep wanting this one to have more than that one. If we realize that these divisions are illusory, why I will steal from myself. There is a lecture that I hold very dear, which I gave about a poem by Cecilia Meirelles, called The Canticles. There is a passage where she says, whenever you say, "This is mine," you are stealing from yourself. I find that beautiful, but was it possible that Cecilia Meirelles read such a book? She did. She loved Eastern philosophy. Did she read Plato? She did. But she kept that under her mattress. She never published it. Yet it is her most beautiful work, her 26 Canticles. Whenever you say, "This is mine," you steal from yourself. Everything is yours, so why choose just one piece? And who is this mine in the story? Who are you stealing from? From yourself. You already are everything. So, to Lao Tzu, this awareness must be at the end of all our searches, even if we do not fully understand it right now. Do you understand this? I have already told you this little story 500 times, and now, this will be the 101st time. I used to tell you that when I am locked inside a house, I don't like the sunlight, I don't even want to know about the sunlight, and I am in the dark. Then I decide to make peace with the sun, and I open the doors and windows. Just by deciding to make peace with the sun, its light already reaches me, wherever I am. Even though the distance hasn't changed, whether the window is closed or open. Simply by my intention to put myself in contact with it. So, I consciously choose to put myself in contact with the ideal, which knows no separateness. I no longer have the same right to be selfish as I did before. Do you see? Because my goal is to overcome separateness. In other words, the sunlight reaches me where I am, simply through my willingness to be in contact with it. So, there is a great distance between us and the understanding that the universe is one. Yes, but just the act of saying, "I'll discover, I'll understand this," already changes everything. You opened the window, that's what you did. Therefore, there is already light inside here, even though the distance has not changed. The mathematical distance remains the same, but the psychological distance has advanced tremendously. You have no idea. There are many kinds of measures in the universe. So let's continue with this drawing. It appears in various traditions, the Jewish tradition, which is generally the one we know best, the one closest to us, where the Star of David represents the union between spirit and matter. Do you notice that it has a little point in the center? In other words, when it is discovered that spirit and matter share a common origin, they revolve around the same center, which is unity. Spirit and matter are nothing more than representations, in the dual world, of an idea that is unity. And above unity, there is the void. This is the hierarchy of values in the Tao Te Ching. Let's continue. At their origin, both, that is, heaven and earth, spirit and matter, are one and the same, differing only in name. Because one is called spirit and the other matter, but both come from unity. In its unity, this one is a mystery. The mystery of mysteries is the gateway through which wonders enter. Everything that your consciousness can consider. Here, I spoke a little about this. The origin of spirit and matter, we have already said that the one is more than just one. It is the gateway through which everything your consciousness can imagine enters. Imagine anything. I imagined, I don't know, a human being. You imagine something separate. It is within multiplicity. I imagined love. You imagined a separate love. Because we are not able to imagine something without limits. Our mind, when it creates an image, it creates boundaries. Have you ever seen a child, when you say, draw a little house, the first thing they do is draw a line. They divide what is inside the house and what is outside the house. When we set out to imagine, the first thing we create is separateness. And so, whatever you imagine is one of the wonders that came from that portal of unity. Whether it is from the spiritual plane or from the material plane, our mind has a great deal of difficulty thinking about things without lines. That is why we need to develop something beyond the minda bit of intuition, a bit of direct vision of things. At first and foremost, we must look within ourselves so that we can then practice outwardly. First, we must find this within ourselves and only then project it outward. Leonardo da Vinci had a habit. For those who have closely observed the Mona Lisa, it was a common technique during the Renaissance. That is, common in quotation marks, but some artists practiced it, which was called sfumato. If you look at the Mona Lisa, she has no lines. What am I going to put it for? Thing truly has a line. I am not seeing any lines at all. Where do people get this idea of lines from? Things intensify in color and then diffuse, but in reality, things are simply concentrations within an infinite space. They are part of that space. They are not separate from the background scenery. What am I going to put a line for? And people would look at him and say, you must be crazy. Things are separated from the background. No, they are not, they are not, they are not. He insisted, painted the Mona Lisa, and he truly was not. It is something disconcerting, because in reality, nothing ends anywhere, nothing in it truly ends. Sfumato do not have lines. They are not divided from the background. So this idea is quite interesting. Everything we think is divided. Everything we think is fragmented. Whether it is something spiritual or something material, it is fragmented. These are the wonders that we know. And then we say, let us live in unity. But what is unity? You do not know what that is, so what are you going to live? I don't know. It's just something out there people call unity. What is it? I can't think about it, so you won't be able to experience it. In some way, we need to become aware of how deeply we are conditioned by separateness, so that one day we might overcome it. Because, in truth, we do not think about anything that is not divided. Well, I have already spoken to you about this idea of Parabrahman and Mula Prakriti. It is not most important, but it is because the Indian tradition offers guidance. This is not related to Taoism, it is from India. The Indian tradition helps because it names 0 and 1. These are the two concepts. So, for Lao Tzu, the Tao is 0. The one without a second is 0. And the one would be feminine, it would be a shadow, it would be manifestation. It is easy, isn't it? You guys look like things are really going well. Self-explanatory. I promised one of my students, who commented on YouTube saying that I kept saying things were difficult, that I wouldn't say things are difficult anymore. So, it is easy. This is suggestioning. I learned this from the Kybalion. So, everything is easy.